start off. And folks, again, that QR code, if you want to take a quick shot and contribute to the survey, or if you want to hit the link in the chat, that's great too. You'll probably see this link come out to you a couple times in the follow-up materials, but Jenny, over to you to get us going.
Thank you very much. If you want to answer the survey a couple of times too, your answers matter. We'll take the weight from the questions. Okay, so as always, we'll start with our moment of acknowledgement. So we know that most people join us from across Canada, few down into the US, and every now and then someone from far and beyond. So wherever you're joining us from today, thank you for being here on Thursday. Don't forget it's Thursday today. So we've left the state view and we're looking down on Calgary's downtown here and the Bow River. And Rob Crooks has just joined us from Bowness. How appropriate on this slide right here. So SAIT acknowledges always that we are on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. And Calgary was originally known as Mokintus, which means elbow. And it was the place where the two great rivers meet. So the Elbow River and the Bow River. It is our traditional land, as I said, of the Blackfoot people, shared by the Beaver people of the Tsuut'ina, the Nakota people of the Stony Nakota, as well as the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, and the Northwest Métis homeland. Wherever you are today, thank you for just taking a moment with us to acknowledge where we are, where we're living, where we're learning, and hopefully at some point on your Thursday where you're laughing as well today. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you. So if you joined us before, obviously, feel free to carry on the conversation in the chat. We always get so much out of the comments that fly in there. If you've got specific questions about where we're going today, please put them into the Q&A. And if you found the chat, it's just 2 spaces to the left. But we wanted to talk this morning, Jenny, about conversations. So I guess we're going to have a conversation about conversation. That was awkward. And the reason being is we have talked about this a lot, or you have, especially. I take this from you, right? At the end of the day, if you want to find something out, if you want to help your team, if you want to help a teammate, have a conversation. But as a leader, I think conversations are something far more important, because that's really your only opportunity to help or influence folks on your team. And so we wanted to chat about that today. What are the types of the conversations that leaders have? How do they do it? And I think you've got a great question to try and kick us off here. So this will be the audience participation portion of the conversation.
Hold on a minute, it's coming back. I just had it for a second there. There they go. The question is, would you pay you? And you don't have to fill this one in the chat. We have another question for you as well in a moment. But actually, no, let's attach this one. As a leader, and even if you're not a leader, in your company, what are you paid to do? On a daily basis, what are you paid to do? Let's grab a few answers to that in our chat this morning. And it doesn't mean post your job description in there in simple one sentence.
Yeah.
What are you paid to do on a daily basis?
Yeah. As a leader, what are you paid to do?
Oh, we go. Get results. Tammy speaker. I like that. Provide mortgage. There we go. Okay.
There we go.
And we can take even the ones. I love this. We should have done this on our word cloud or Menti next time. Okay. Solve problems, remove roadblocks, bring the team together, inspire my team to do their best, engage and support. Already, we'd like to work for you. But when you think about each one of these, if you're watching the chat flash by your eyes, and it really does flash by our eyes, if you look at each one of these, what it boils down to is conversation. And so as a leader especially, but even as an individual contributor, everything that we do is built on that foundation of conversation. And so it doesn't matter whether you're striving for KPIs, what have we got else here? Solve problems whilst collaborating, nourishing, growing your leadership pipeline, supporting advisors, engaging. Every single one of them comes down to having a conversation of some kind. And so that tag, have the conversation, is essential. But then I guess the next question is, what kind of conversation are you having? And I think that was the biggest part that caught us as we were noodling on this idea, is just how many different conversations a leader can have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just making a few notes here because there's a few things that came through that triggered some thoughts for me. The one around inspire my team, that is an interesting conversation. I think we could double click on a little bit. Lots in there around collaboration, solving problems. I'm also thinking, Jenny, there might be a little bit of conversation around how do you have conversations in this hybrid remote versus face-to-face world, because there's, I think we've probably lost some of that conversation piece as a leader, or it needs to be much more intentional as a leader now to carve out time for conversation instead of being an email jockey and firing off notes in Teams or email isn't a conversation. Right? So what I think about too, the types of conversation, I've got some thoughts around what types of conversations we have. I'm curious if folks would give us their thought, like when you think about the conversations you have with your teams, what types of conversations are they? How would you categorize them? Like for me, for example, one conversation a leader has with their team is providing vision, right? Yeah. Here's where we're going, right? Here's how we're going to get there. What other, and just for the audience, if you would throw your comments in here about what types of conversations you have.
And while we're doing that, can we have a moment for Austin's comment on herding wet cats? That's perfect. I've heard of herding cats, but not wet cats. That's a whole different level.
that brings an entire different. Yeah.
And there we go.
Any other thoughts?
Oh, I like that one, perspective.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. I don't think that's in our crew. Job, Roberta. Coaching, feedback, recognition. Yeah.
Establishing boundaries.
I like that Annette brought stories into there too. I think that's a really important part. We've a slide for that. Tammy, building trust and confidence. I love it.
Coaching.
You see, there's a full.
Yeah. So there's a good range here, and what I'm liking. So for me, I kind of put them into 5 buckets. Why? Because 5 fingers is easy to remember. But I think about providing vision. Inspiration is an interesting one for me. I think I think leaders sometimes really hope they can be that quote unquote inspirational leader and really provide that boost. Maybe we'll touch on that and whether that's actually true or not. Accountability for me is another huge, there we go. Walter just either heard me say it or put it in just before I said it. Corrective action, I think is another conversation you may also have. And then the other bucket that I like to talk about is kind of the last resort is the career options conversation. In other words, whether you stay or whether you go.
Yeah, you're another tree.
I don't know what that triggers for you, but I think there's a few directions that we could take on this. So
let's just take a peek at this. It's interesting you had 5 buckets. I have 5 too, but then they're not the same 5 as you. So there we are. So
we've got 10 buckets.
There we go. And that gives us loads to talk about this morning. But I think when you look at the conversations that leaders are involved in, and there's your 5 within the arrows. So we could take every one. In fact, I think yours are on there too, Craig. And this is much more, I think, about how we have that conversation. Are we telling? Are we teaching? Are we asking, learning, or sharing? And what we know is in the sort of paradigm shift that's happened in leadership, much more of our conversations are heading over to the right as we look at this. And there's less of that control and command. And we're still going to get the job done. We still have difficult conversations. We were chatting with Gina the other week about conflict. It's all still there. I think it's just how we're having the conversations. We're getting better at, more adept at. You bring in a really good point about that hybrid piece, as a hybrid piece as well. It's really different when we're doing this compared to face. And then the red on the top, just for people, is these are sort of the key pieces in any conversation. So, what is your intention with the conversation? Just looking at the chat now, is when we look at this later, pages of this. If your intention isn't the same intention as the other person you're in a conversation with, you're in two different conversations. So let's get that intention sorted so we're at least having the right conversation. Passion speaks for itself. If you don't care, the other person won't care. The value we've talked about, what value are you providing in that conversation? At the end of the day, when you look back on the conversations you've had, would you pay you for that day? Have you provided value in each of the different types that you've had? Trust just goes without saying. You know, we all know, you walk into a room with somebody you trust, or you join on camera with someone you trust, everything is different in your conversation. So I forget who said it now, but building trust is absolutely primordial. And then contribution and language, you know, the language is the difference between control and command and the other end of the continuum, or anywhere down the continuum. It's just language. And then contributing, I'm doing it now, so I'm going to stop talking, but we have a voice share there. Like, what's your contribution to the conversation? If you're doing all the talking, you're holding the voice share. And so your other person, you're not in a conversation, you're just holding stage.
Yeah, and you know, your voice share is totally fine, because sometimes I ramble too. I probably do it far more than you do. But I think part of this too, for me, when I think about it, and I think more and more leaders now need to be intentional about figuring out how to carve out time for these conversations. We are all stretched so thin and pulled in so many different ways, and playing chief firefighter and bottle washer, and trying to, it's a saying from my grandpa, and just how do you make this work? Like, how do you find, I guess it comes down to the intentionality. And that's, I struggle sometimes with the planned conversation, perhaps being insincere or less authentic than the conversations in the moment. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I don't know what that triggers for you. Or for anybody, feel free to, thanks, Walter.
I think what it comes down to, and as Craig said, feel free, not just in the chat if you need this to go a certain way, but it really does depend on your context, like where you're at. And one of the things that we know with leadership, like you talked originally about vision, and maybe even that inspiration bit, I think we'll get there in a while. But if you're thinking it, nobody else knows. If you're talking about it, they, being your team, might be thinking about it. If you say it once, guaranteed, someone might remember it. Depends whether you caught them with your language in there or not. And so how do we make it happen? I think as a leader, you have to be clear cut on what your priorities are and where you're going. Because, you know, we know full well, you said today's your Friday, so you're not there tomorrow. The day job will happen. Everyone will, I mean, generally as adults, we want to shop and do our job. But if you've got your priorities and you're constantly talking in every different way within those, you might be delegating, you might be coaching, you might be sharing stories. When you're talking about it, they're thinking about it as well. And that helps in there. And so then when you're talking about what is your priority, which way do we need to go, you have to have that intention set within there.
I really like what you touched on there with priority, especially as a leader, because your point around, you know, has communication even happened? Yes, if I'm thinking about it, it's all up here, which is a scary place for it to be. If I've talked about it, it doesn't necessarily mean that anybody's heard it.
No.
Right. And, you know, why do you think we see the same ads over and over again? It's because it takes how many times of hearing a message before it actually sticks?
I want to say to you 7, but I feel like I think it's even more than that. And the other piece, I found this out the other day. I didn't know I was going to tell you this. So in where were we? In the year 2000, that initial attention span of a human was 15 seconds. So when you start to talk, I am absolutely invested in you for 15 seconds. And then it begins to peter off. And in 2015, that had reduced to 9 seconds. No, ours had reduced to 8 seconds. Sorry, I'm going off the top of my head here. That had reduced to 8 seconds. So it doesn't mean I'm not listening. It just means you don't have my full attention. It kind of runs out after there. Here's the scary fact. A goldfish has the attention span of 9 seconds. So we're not even as good as goldfish all the time. So we really have to, we have to think about what we're saying and where we're going with that piece as well.
Yeah, so what you're getting at there is Ted Lasso would be very happy with all of us, right?
If I'd watched Ted Lasso, I don't have Apple TV.
Yeah, the happiest animal on the face of the planet is a goldfish because it only has.
I believe that.
There you go. Some interesting comments here. Sorry. Ted Lasso. Well, we're going to have to get you an Apple subscription, Jenny, and do a session on Ted Lasso.
I'd be up for that.
I think well planned out conversations can still be authentic. Absolutely, Rob. I agree. Oh, you touched on something really important there, and that's how well you listen. The planned intentional conversation can be very authentic. As Jocelyn, but are the goldfish waiting for food? Yes, probably. So yeah, I like that. The other thing that comes to mind when I think about these conversations is, and we touched on this a bit with Gina a couple of weeks ago around conflict, but not all difficult conversations are about conflict. Sometimes difficult conversations are just difficult because it's not fun to give people corrective action or corrective feedback. Sorry, I'm probably butchering some language that we don't want to use when we're talking about feed forward. But just thoughts there, right? This whole aspect of difficult conversation, because I think often when we bring up this topic of how to plan for conversations, I think we probably take it from the perspective of this is going to be a tough conversation, so I need to plan it. Whereas the good conversations, maybe it's just me, maybe you aren't as planful when you're going into those. I don't know if that triggers anything for you or anybody in the audience.
Yeah, there's two things that come in there. One is the trust factor. So a difficult conversation with someone that you trust is much, much easier than someone that you're wary of and that you don't have that full trust. And so, we've talked quite a few times about building social capital. And so that's another conversation in itself. When are you getting to know your team members? You've got to know your audience. And the better you know your audience, the more that you change, those conversations. And remember, and we've mentioned this before, and I know that we're going to have someone in here soon who will talk in depth with us on this one, but trust is built from 4 components. So we've got reliability, sincerity, care, and competence. And so that gives us a structure around trust. It isn't as simple as I trust you or I don't trust you. A step, if you want to take the easy step too, is, how would this conversation be if I trusted you just 10% more? And if I can enter with that, then I open the field in that difficult conversation. And the other piece I think that's really important, and somebody mentioned this in the chat, it is flying past my eyes, but it's about creating space. And in creating space in that one, there's nothing wrong with, this is going to be a tough conversation for me. I'm going to ask you just to bear with me here, but this is where I'd like to get to. There's my intention. And I need you to know that this isn't going to be easy. I might waver. Okay, I may need time to think. There's that awkward pause. We don't like awkward pauses as a rule. Generally, people fill in for us. That can be useful. And in that sort of creating space within there, you don't have to do all the talking. And so often as a leader, we've got this bit of a plan and we go in and we start talking, and then our anxiety or our emotional intensity has gone up. So we talk again and we talk again, and then we don't even know it, but we've said the same thing 5 times. Well, the attention span's long gone.
Yeah.
And all we needed to do is walk in and ask for their perspective, maybe. It's a bit of a courage step to chuck the control of the conversation to the other person straight away. But if you do that and listen, you're already into a good conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I think I might rephrase, and this comes from training that I took a long time ago. Awkward pause with the phrase golden silence.
There you go. Yeah, I like that.
Right? And sometimes that silence is needed. Well, often it's needed, right?
Yeah,
I think
always.
the challenge with the conversation is often I think we feel we need to fill the space the entire time, which is, I just paraphrased everything you just said. But also the concept, I think, of kind of laying out your thought process for the conversation is a step that people often miss. I loved where you went at the start to say, here's where I intend to go.
Yeah.
Right. I might have a tough time getting there. So, bear with me as we work through this together. I love that. Interesting. Yeah. Silence is your best friend at times. Curious silence. I like that one too.
That one. Yeah. That's good.
Elaine has got a comment in here. Maybe we could jump to this whole piece in hybrid remote now, though. It says educate on body language, which right now, very difficult perhaps to see that in this remote world. So thoughts around that one early on, it just triggered me, this whole hybrid remote versus face-to-face. And are we going to see different patterns of behavior emerge around what types of conversations we're willing to have in what format?
That's a really interesting angle for us all, because different companies, different organizations are, let's just say, using different versions. So we've got, some companies have gone back full face-to-face, others are doing hybrid, others are still working virtual. There are some companies where cameras off is still absolutely the way that they run, and they have done the whole way through the pandemic. And I'm not advocating camera on all day. Don't sort of misquote me on that one. So there's a few things within there in body language. Body language is our strongest sort of message piece. So if you and I are talking face to face and my body language says one thing, my words are saying the other thing, you actually pay more attention to my body language when you can see those cues. When we're working virtually, if there's just two of you in a conversation virtually, then it's still quite easy to pick up on those body language cues. But I think even now, even after 2 years, it's still worthy of saying, just so when I'm listening to you, it's not going to look like I'm looking at you. And so that allows me to look at you. And when I'm talking to you, I'm actually going to talk to you. And that gives us the invitation to pick up on more body cues. But we've more than that too. We've tone of voice. We do have that silence. And the piece that somebody had said earlier on, employer emotional intelligence as well, that the part that's okay to do is, what are you noticing? So when we listen in a conversation, at its sort of first level, we listen just to ourselves. What do I need? What do I think? What are my stories? Where am I going with this? It's all about me. And then there's another level where actually all I focus is on you. And so I put everything for me aside. I'm not paying attention to that. I need to know where you are, what you're doing, what you need, blah, blah, blah. And it's just you. But full listening is both of us and that bubble in between. And so, does that sound like, Craig, was that a pause to think? Are you struggling with something there? I'm picking up that some things happened. Can you tell me more? And the invitation is there. No, Jenny, my mind's just gone blank and I can't think of anything. Okay, fine, we can carry on. Or yes, I'm struggling with this concept, or I'm surprised at how annoyed I am with this decision. And I just need time to digest that. Great. Then we know that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Great comment here from Janet. I think there's value in letting the person you're speaking with know up front they don't need to respond immediately. Yeah. Right.
Yep.
Right. Why would we expect somebody, if you're delivering a hard message, for them to be able to instantaneously respond?
And there's a piece in there, we call it, like, we're in our communications and working with people in this area, is, really what we're doing is helping people to breathe. And so you've got that wicked noise in your head. Our heads are busy. We are wired to think. And if we're really paying attention, we're thinking about the conversation. 9 times out of 10, our brains are super active. We're thinking about the conversation. We're worried about the future. There's another meeting this afternoon. I have no idea what I'm cooking for dinner tonight. And so there's all that noise in your head. There is a ton of noise in our world. Like, we are overloaded with what's going on. You know, even in your organization, there might be turbulence, transition, change, your community, your family, your world, like wherever. You've got noise in your head, noise in your world. And in between there, there's a space. And we have, really, as leaders, we have a little bit of a responsibility to allow people just to breathe in that space just for a little bit and find some clarity and find their next question.
Yeah, because, you know, to be honest, as a leader, it's your job to make sure you help your team member through that conversation as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's absolutely your responsibility to make that space. I love that. Question here, is there a way / how to prepare someone for having a conversation in advance without causing undue stress and alarm bells? I guess triggering that. Oh, I think you understand exactly what the question is asking.
So in the days before pandemic, it used to look like this: we need to talk. And every single person in the back of their head is like, what's happening here?
Now it's just the red flag meeting invitation.
Yeah. And I think there's value in that. That comes down to, we've said this so many times, know your audience. And know where people are at. So sometimes when you say, all right, I need some time to have a conversation. Well, now I'm guessing, like, what is that conversation? Or I've just delivered a presentation and you say to me, good job, let's talk about it tomorrow. That gives me nothing, absolutely nothing. So I think that we can set people up for success. And it comes back to, what's the intention? Okay, I'd like to have a conversation on what went well and how we can make it even better next time. Maybe you put some thought into that before we talk tomorrow. Jenny, I've been sent this email from whoever, and I think this is worthy of discussion. Have a think about this and bring your thoughts tomorrow. So, you know, rather than just set the meeting, tell someone that you need to talk, is what's the intention? We're right back to there again. What is the intention in this part? And the more that we can do that, the more time that the other person gets to think about it from their side. And here's the crucial piece, though: when you go into that conversation, there is another side to their perspective. Their truth, their reality is different to yours. And when are you going to hear that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's me that came up with this or if I heard it somewhere else, is that there's often 3 sides to every conversation or every situation. My interpretation of it, your interpretation of it, and what actually happened.
There you go. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind there too, that came to mind for me when you're with that question specifically, is I can't control how you are going to respond if I say, hey, I want to have a meeting or a conversation with you. I can't control that reaction. I can provide, to your point, I can provide context around what it is I want to have the conversation about. But how you choose to react to that, I'll be honest, at the end of the day, isn't my responsibility. Yeah. Isn't in my control. Sorry.
And no, I agree with you. And as long as the context is key, the context and the intention, set the scene, and then it's over to the other person. And if you know the other person well, how much context and what level you put that, and what questions, like, really, let's approach this from questions. And you've seen that, I think it's on our 3 questions later. The best question is the one that you don't know the answer to, or you don't think that you know the answer to.
Yeah.
That's a curiosity question.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Aaron, great comment here, Aaron. You know, as part of creating safety, I think it's important to let people know what the conversation is about before the meeting. Right. Absolutely.
100%.
You touched on questions though, Jenny, and I think that's an important one. And I think if you're leading that conversation, if I want to have a conversation with you over some issue, challenge, opportunity, recognition, whatever it might be, I'm hoping to have that conversation to hear your thoughts. Otherwise, it's just a monologue. It's not a conversation. So thoughts on asking good questions? I'm being very leading because I know you have a slide on this.
You know I do, and I'm now going to share that slide just because I'm doing that slide in here. We're going to rely on technology here for a second though. Let's see if this works. Maybe not. Try again. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
We nailed it. Okay. So questions, absolutely key. So this is just one of a few. I think one of the better sort of providers in terms of knowledge, research on this is David Marquay. And we can put that stuff into the extra resources. But when we think about good questions, so there's a lot of information out there at the moment on being curious. Curious is like a buzzword, along with collaboration. There's another Friday morning, all the C's of leadership. Yeah. So when we're asking good questions, first off, one question at a time. That's actually advice I don't want you to take, Craig, because you often give me 3 questions and I can pick the one I like. But when we're in an actual conversation, we don't want to stack those questions. And so if you just take a peek, often we ask 4 questions at a time, and it's mixed with eagerness, enthusiasm, wanting to find out more. But if you think about, if you and I are playing catch, conversation is like a rhythm. It's like a game of catch. If I stack questions, I just took a handful of those and just chucked them all at you at once. Which one are you going to pick up? How are you going to deal with it? So that's the first piece, is one at a time. The second one in there is that learning piece. And I think you've already covered this in, we want to enter the conversation almost assuming that we're not right. And we have our beliefs, we have our opinions, they are right to us. But if we enter assuming that the other person is right, you'll find yourself learning. And learning sounds like, can you tell me more? How did that happen? How do you see this? And so we're constantly learning more about that other side. It gives us an awful lot more information. And as you're a leader, as you move up, if you're working in a hierarchy, you lose touch down here. So those kind of learning moments re-engage you with what's really going on, not how you remember it when you were good at that job and hold that position, but how's that looking now? The binary ones are really interesting. So a binary question, think closed question, really simple, but the voice share changes quite dramatically in binary questions. So a binary question would sound like, is it safe? I can only answer that as yes or no. And so is it safe is 3 words, yes or no is 1 word, 3 to the leader, 1 word to the answer. Yeah. If we switch that and say, how safe is it? That's 4 from you. And my answer, well, actually at the moment, I think we're probably hitting about an 8 out of 10 on safety. And here's why we're at an 8 out of 10. You just got a whole load more information simply by switching to a what or a how question. And that ties into that last one, that self-affirming piece within there. We want to feel good. We want to feel like we're ready so we can reach that target. And we do it as well when we want to know that we've been heard and understood. So I might say to you, does that make sense? And I simply want you to affirm that I just made sense to you. Whereas actually, if I switch that and say, what else do you need from me to be able to start? Now I'm not self-affirming that, I'm asking you. So that's sort of a nugget towards how we can make our curiosity more helpful, more valuable, maybe.
Yeah, the self-affirming one, I like that. Does that make sense? Really can put a person on a spot, especially if it didn't make sense.
Yes.
Like what an awkward position to put somebody in.
Yeah. And if you don't have psychological safety in there, there's no way I'm saying to you, no, you didn't make any sense to me at all. Like that's not happening. And so we're actually, we could be down a really bad roadway there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Another great comment here from Aaron, right? To coach others and grow and do better, you have to tailor your approach to where they are and their current perspective, 100%, which also I think leads to some thoughts perhaps around, I don't know if this is the right phrase, conversations with a group versus conversations with an individual. This is very difficult to tailor. And sorry, this just the thought that it triggered for me, Erin, was difficult to tailor a conversation to a group. Much easier to well, maybe not, depending on who you are, to tailor to an individual, right? Obviously, it requires deep knowledge of that individual to be able to tailor it there. So I don't know. I don't know if that triggers anything for you, Jenny. It was a great comment. I just thought.
It is a great comment, and it's a cool perspective on it too. Because if we're, I think the best place to go with that is this idea of collaboration. And so tailoring to a group, if you have a message, if you're simply providing information, don't do it face to face. You don't need to.
But just be an email, perhaps. There
you go. Okay, all Teams, whatever. Yeah. So, but when we want to convene with people, the idea is that collaboration. And I think where that goes wrong, when we don't put enough thought into that, is we arrive with our message and it becomes actually consensus. So here's what senior management wants us to achieve. Here's how I think we're going to do it. What do you think? And at that point, some leaders are like, look at me collaborate. I'm getting all of their perspectives. No, not really. Actually, what you're looking for is consensus that your idea is a good idea. And so tailoring for that group is, are you ready to create the space to be productive in your response as you actually let them be a part of the conversation? And your job then becomes, because we know what happens, you have 6 to 8 people around the room, 2 are going to want to do the talking. There's going to be 2 of us that like the stage, don't mind talking, and will talk. And then there's a handful of people who have great ideas and can't get a word in edgeways. So how do you manage that piece? So I think with a group, not only is it what do I need to find out and where do we need to get to, but you've got to look at facilitating that conversation.
Yeah.
And then, yes, one-on-one, a little bit more thought, but it becomes very personal at that point. And that's not to say the group conversations aren't personal, but a one-on-one conversation is personal. Which brings us to, I don't have a slide for this, but the words "don't take it personally." Stop, okay? It is personal. You and I are in a conversation. This is personal.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And to be clear, I was saying that Erin's comment was a great comment, not my comment. And also earlier in the chat, Yelena touched on exactly, collaboration does not mean consensus. 100%.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So we've touched on a couple of things. I think, for me, the piece that sticks out to me around the number of times you have to share your message really speaks to vision, right?
Yes.
And the fact that if you've got a vision where you want to take your team, you're going to have to find a number of ways to communicate that and communicate it a number of times. We talked about asking those questions and approaching some of those difficult conversations, which for me kind of get into accountability and corrective action. The one we haven't touched on is whether we can actually inspire through conversation. And I'm curious about that. I once had a sales manager, a regional director, interview me for a sales management job, and asked me outright. He says, "Craig, how are you going to inspire your team?" And I was very young and so on, and I went on a long rambling answer, and he finally cut me off and he said, "You can't inspire anybody." He said, "The only person that can inspire somebody is themselves." And I thought, it's an interesting perspective. But what are your thoughts around this whole piece of inspiration?
Okay, so I knew you were going to ask me this because this is always going to come in here. So I ran a poll in my house yesterday, and I'm interested for the audience. So think of a movie, and in the movie, the leader, whatever that might be, makes that inspirational speech, and everybody toes the line, rises to the occasion, and nails it. So feel free, anybody in the audience, what is the movie where the leader makes that speech and everything changes? Okay, so we've got Dave, Kevin Kline. That didn't come up in my house, so Braveheart did. Hosiers I haven't heard of. Wolf of Wall Street. Dead Poet Society definitely came up in our house. Yeah. Rudy, yes, Braveheart. There we go.
Hoosiers, yeah, absolutely. Jenny, if you've never seen Hoosiers? Oh, no. It's a basketball movie.
Oh, well, the rest of my house probably has. Any Given Sunday, that came up too. Yep. All right, so we can see lots of them coming in, and feel free, because I'm just building my movie list for next time it snows here. The North American one I was introduced to yesterday, thank you, was Miracle. And I was chatting to one of the kids' friends yesterday, and they said, "You haven't seen Miracle?" No, but that was because it's an ice hockey movie, I think. But what we know here, and we sort of have here, let's go.
Remember the Titans? Yeah.
Yeah, Remember the Titans. That was another one. So here are the ones that came up in our house yesterday. Oh, blank screen, maybe not. Okay. Right, we're going to stop sharing that. I've lost my slide deck for some reason. But the ones that came up in our house, Remember the Titans, Braveheart, Coach Carter, there's a basketball movie for you, Dead Poet Society. But the thing for leaders, to get back on point here, is you're not in Hollywood. These are movies. Like the sales manager that was interviewing you, it's absolutely spot on. And we think of all these sort of Hollywood leaders that deliver this soliloquy and everybody rises to the occasion. Maybe once in your career that might happen. Maybe once, depending on the job you have and depending on the leader role that you have to play. But when we look at actual leaders, like, all those sports movies, Remember the Titans and Coach Carter, etc., actual coaches actually rarely say that amount in a halftime speech or a pre-game speech. And so that inspiration piece, as he said, you can't inspire other, you can't actually motivate other people. But what you can do is paint the picture for them. You can talk about purpose. And when we talk about purpose, we really pull in that heart statement. We appeal to people's emotions. If I agree with the purpose, I'm coming with you. And that's why it looks like inspiration. But actually what I'm doing is I'm attaching to the purpose piece within there. And so, really what people are looking for is, we want to know what the purpose is, paint that picture for them. Do you have a heart statement that ties into it? Pull on those beliefs. Simon Sinek, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. What's the head statement? We have data run people. So what are the facts? What are the figures? Why are we going this way? And then if there is an urgency, why now? What is the piece now? And the more that I can understand and the more that I can see that, so that I can actually paint the same picture as you, then I'm going to get pulled into that direction, into that drift, if you like, of where we're heading. A really good piece to sort of align people is have your team sit down and write down the top 3 priorities of the team. Just ask them all to write down the top 3 priorities. And if you get consensus around your entire table or Zoom screen or whatever it might be of those top 3 priorities, you are absolutely winning at that point, because most don't. And there's a great conversation straight away, because we're not all hearing it, seeing it the same way. So it allows us to align within there.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. I'm thinking of an upcoming meeting. But what I also like, some great movies brought up there, by the way. Also glad to see that, the sit scene from Glengarry Glen Ross didn't make it, nor the boiler room recruitment scene with Ben Affleck. Great scenes, but not necessarily great leadership. So Jenny, I'm just looking at the time here. We are 8:45, and I think we need to start getting folks on their way. And I might be able to share my screen if you're.
Let's try one more time.
Okay.
We'll just. The moment it's the black screen of death. Let's see. No, we're going to have to go to yours, Craig. Sorry.
Okay. No worries.
It's weird.
We will give it a go. So why don't you start the conversation around the 3.
17 maybe.
Yeah, I'm just fighting with my Zoom as well. So here we go.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that is why you share the slide deck on both sides of the Zoom screen.
Yeah, that's not going to work. So,
all right, well, we'll do it verbally.
The one big idea. We'll go old school.
We'll do it verbally.
Yeah.
All right, you're going to see me looking sideways, so I make sure I stick to what I was thinking yesterday. Okay, so our one big idea today is that communication underpins everything that you do. Just watch today as you work through your day, how many different conversations you're having, the language that you're using in that conversation, and how long you're talking for, and what's the value that you're providing. Communication is everything. That's our big idea. 2 applied strategies that you can take. The first one we don't need a slide for. The second one, we're going to work on this a bit. But the first applied strategy, we've talked about it lots, and I'm glad that we did. Be clear. Okay, Brené Brown's infamous statement, clear is kind, unclear is unkind, and set your intention. And, wary of that. The minute our anxiety goes up, our clarity goes down. We think we're being crystal clear, but we're actually fapping around so we don't hurt somebody's feelings. So come from a place of compassion, kindness, making the task, whatever it is, better, and find the clarity in there. Don't forget to set your intention. Jocelyn, I love that acronym too. It is a good one. Our next, there we go, that'll work. We can keep it right there. This is about context. Are you framing the conversation? So if I give you just these numbers, those mean nothing to you. I could say to you, the first 3 were odd numbers, and the second I tried to use 2 even numbers. I'm giving you a little bit more context. But if I tell you that at 6:59 yesterday morning, I had 20 slides and 2 cups of coffee, now those numbers suddenly make sense. So what context, how can you provide the frame for the conversation to give clarity? And you can do that in groups, and you can do that in one-on-one conversations, and do it for yourself. There's a huge amount of reality testing, and just stop and pay attention to the conversation around you. And then our questions probably is easier. There we go. So I'm going to get back and behave myself, I think, next time we come, because originally we said 1 big idea, 2 applied strategies, and only 3 questions. And the last couple of times I've gone outside of that. But, the worst question, do you understand? Right? You're putting somebody down, you're setting them up for nothing in that place. The best question, we've already talked about that. The greatest questions are the ones that you literally don't know the answer to. And then for you, as you leave here today, equal to watching the conversations you do have, which are the ones that you're putting off? We find some of these super easy, and we find some of these difficult, and we'll run away from those for days. Your voice share, are you talking too much? Is it a 50-50 split? And then where can you contribute more? We didn't get there today, Craig, but as leaders, we have a contribution, and we almost have an accountability to contribute more. It's really sad to me when I still hear people talking about silos, and this unit isn't getting on with this unit. As a leader, you can join the dots, and you can fill with that context, paint the picture, tell people what you're doing. And that just helps us all. So is there somewhere where you could contribute and add to the conversation?
Perfect. And we are back on the week of April 5th or 4th, I guess that would be. So we've got a special panel session coming up on April 6th on the future of leadership development. And on April 8th, we've got a session that Jenny and I are very excited about as well. I'm excited about the 6th too, but April 8th, Deb Herlock from Pembina will be joining us. And this is going to be a very interesting conversation. We feel very lucky and honored to have Deb joining us. And Jenny, thank you so much for making that connection. And with that, as always, Jenny, I totally appreciate everything that you bring to this conversation and all that you do. And have a great day, everyone. We will talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thanks everybody too. Thanks for joining us today.
See ya. Take care.
Bye-bye.